Hello, just want to talk a little bit about what research is in illustration. Now, quite often on a project, you can feel a little bit like this character and you feel a little bit stuck. This is quite often when you feel that you've only got the one idea. It can feel a little bit repetitive. You probably feel you've done it before, but you really can't think of anything else. This sort of creative block is actually quite common. And really, the cause of it is just because you're not adding new stuff into the mix. Look at the character here. Now we add lots of new stuff going in. What this tends to do is trigger lots more ideas, which you can then start to evaluate. You can think about which ones are not worth developing, throw them in the bin, which ones you can save for later because they're not really appropriate to the brief at the moment, and which ones you can probably develop. And you can actually develop more than one idea at this stage. So what I'm going to show you next are some of the stages that can really help kind of fire these ideas up in the first place. Right, so what happens next? You've looked at the brief, you've got an indication of where to start, or you've got some ideas perhaps. Now we think about the process of research that can actually help the project develop. First things first, check these basic facts. Internet is the best place for this. Do a quick overview, make sure you understand what the brief means, what the terminology in the brief means, but also have a look at the kind of subject matter that you're being asked to develop. What can happen next? Well, you've now got some more great ideas starting to come through, but this is the point where you maybe don't want to lose them. So this is where we need to capture them. You might find a blog useful to do this. You might find sketchbooks or journals, but generally don't let anything go at this stage. If you've got an idea in your head or you've got some sources that you want to follow up, actually sort of write them down, make sure you keep them. So what else can we use to look at? We've got galleries, we've got museums, we've got people and organisations. Don't forget our own university library, huge library with lots of brilliant resources. Don't forget the librarians are there specifically to help you. So remember, Greta and Lizzie are the people that you can ask amongst others, but they do say that their main job is actually to help students find good sources, so don't ignore them. Also on the internet and through the library, there's access to decent online journals, contextual information, references, images, and other sort of resources that you can look at, especially other artists. But again, these are the sort of places that I think you should maybe be looking at as the project develops. Don't just rely on one source. Make sure you're actually looking at all of these mixed together to actually give you a good overview. In addition to all of this, remember, Moodle, which is where we are now, has a lot of extra information that you can follow up on if you want to. And of course, don't forget, probably one of the most useful sources are tutorials where staff and other students will actually help you develop the project. It's important for you to come and help other people, and ideally we'd like to get a whole peer group of people discussing and developing the project together, so you're not working on your own. So if you look at the range of material here, think about what you did on your last project. Have you actually used all of these resources? Because if not, maybe this is where you kind of could develop a bit further. Now we move on to the next stage. We've got the great idea and we're starting to think about the contextual research that can actually help make that make sense. You've actually got information, you've been to galleries, you've been to the library, you've developed some things in your sketchbook. But the next step is we need to think about the expansion of the research. And what format are you actually going to develop this project into? Now, it could be something like children's books or animation, could be posters, 3D work, pop-ups, series of prints, zines, graphic novels or board games, amongst others. But now this is where the research needs to take a slightly different direction. And maybe you find examples of these sort of works to actually think about how you're going to resolve this. So if, for instance, you're thinking it's going to be a board game, what other board games can you look at? How do they function? How do they work? Then we might need to move on to the next step. So how do we start bringing all the project elements together? Fundamental, obviously, is draw everything out. Use your sketchbooks, use paper, use materials. You might want to draw digitally or experiment in the print room or with Risograph, but basically make pictures and lots of them. From these pictures, start to develop actual roughs, working images, so you can see how you can bring all these elements together. This is where you would maybe make a mock-up book or a mock-up graphic novel, or you might put pages together as a sequence for children's books, or you might start experimenting more with materials if you're planning a 3D outcome. Then what you need to do is you look at these things critically and you think about how you can use your research to fix any problems or issues that are not working particularly well. This is where tutors can be particularly helpful and your peers, and so tutorials at this point are really useful so that a group of people can look at the work and work out what needs to be adapted and changed before you finish the final things. We're almost there. We're nearly at the end of the project. We've got the great idea. We've got your working rough so we can actually see what it's going to be. But there's one thing that we haven't really looked at yet. And of course, that's the audience. You've spent all the time making this work, but who's going to actually look at it? Can we actually get some feedback from your audience? This is actually quite tricky, but there are some things that you can do. It might be that you can ask peer group, tutors, family, friends, people on social media, etc. You can sort of search out information. So if you design something primarily for children, can you actually test it on any children? If it's something that's meant to be informative, try it on someone. Do they get the information that you're trying to give them? And again, this is the last sort of stage, that what you can do at this point is if you get feedback from anyone, it can help you make some final adjustments or changes to make sure that the material is suitable. Final stage, finish your artwork. Again, this takes a little bit longer than you would require, so don't leave it to the last day. Make sure you factor in a bit of time for refinements to make sure it looks as good as you want it to be. Hope this sequence has helped with the idea of illustration in research, and you can see how it all is there in order to help you fix and make the artwork as good as possible.